Hello, everyone, and welcome to Theory into Practice. What I'm doing is trying to promote leadership and marketing of the professional and the profession. But in talking with Andrea and some of the stuff she's doing and stuff she plans to do and stuff how we got it, how we got our start, and then how we just make ourselves known and basically knowing our self-worth and our self-value. And the conversations that we were just having is like we have to get it out, we have to get it recorded. Thank you, Andrea, for taking the time to talk to me today. I know you're very busy and you have some great things that have been happening for you. And I can't wait for those who are going to be watching or listening to hear those things. But just thank you for taking the time to talk to me. Welcome.
It's wonderful to be here. I'm happy to talk to everyone. And it is a beautiful day in Bentonville, Arkansas. It's nice to live in a place where I actually get fall and the leaves are changing. It's about 70 degrees. So it's a good Friday, Dan.
That's awesome. Do you get snow there? I'm from Oklahoma and we
Woo!
get some snow, but it's more ice.
Mainly more ice. And I know my kind of first full year moving here through COVID and all the craziness we were all dealing with, it ended with the Texas ice storm that came through all the way to the East Coast. It was negative 17 degrees here. And we had snow on the ground for 20 days, then of course turned into ice. And being a native Californian, I had no idea how to deal with that. So I just stayed inside for 2 weeks.
Oh,
Cut
so
my losses.
yeah. Well, I wanted to jump back in and let everybody know what we were talking about before we hit the record button. I'm sorry I didn't hit it earlier. We're talking about, for me anyway, is what I'm trying to do is basically advertising and marketing the emergency manager and the emergency manager profession. We were talking about really understanding why it's important to really value ourselves, but why it's important to take those initiative steps, even when you feel like you don't really aren't qualified or you don't belong in that area or you're not good enough yet or whatever it may be, that the stinking thinking that goes through your head. But some of the best things come from putting yourself out there outside your comfort zone. And you had mentioned that you've never really been afraid from putting yourself out there. I come a little bit on the opposite side of that. I've always been afraid of putting myself out there, more of an introverted person, but also growing up, when you hear so many things that, well, you can't do that without a degree. You can't do that without the proper experience. And you're like, how do you get the experience if they won't hire you? These type of things, right? And this is what I thinking really can really hold you back. But we talked about with you how you applied for 12 positions with FEMA before you got hired and how that has launched you to where you are today, which is fantastic. For those who don't know, I'm going to ask Andrea also to give a little history of herself, but also what we're doing to really drive the future for her and the EM profession and the professionals. But coming from FEMA and volunteering Red Cross and working at Disney and Walmart, and now branching out on your own in your own business with the consulting, which is doing very well, which I'm so happy to hear. So tell us how it is that you, knowing, okay, I want to do that, but I'm not necessarily fully qualified, stepped outside that realm to say, well, I'm not going to apply for a position just because I don't feel like I'm qualified.
Don't let that hold you back. If I can give one piece of advice to anybody listening, is that if you see a job that you are passionate about, that you think you're a good fit for, just go for it. The worst thing that can happen to you is that you won't hear from them, or you might go through the interview process and ultimately get a no. But the entire process is a learning for you. And I truly, like Dan, as you were mentioning, I feel like I almost was born without that gene of telling you like, oh, don't go for it. I truly threw my name in the hat for any opportunity that the level I was looking for with FEMA's Louisiana Recovery Office for Hurricane Katrina. Tony Russell was the head of the office at the time, and I think you interviewed him recently. He's one of my favorite humans on this planet, and I finally wore that man down. 12 times I interviewed and I got rejections, and then on the 12th, not the 13th, on the 12th, right after the BP oil spill, I got a call, and I was with the city and county of San Francisco at that time, got a call saying that I was selected for their director of external affairs to help tell the story of the recovery efforts. And I was just, Dan, beside myself. I had no idea really what I was walking into. I was so excited about the job. And this was year 5 post Katrina, but I'm so glad I kept at it because I it was almost like a calling, Dan, to want to do and help. I had done some volunteer work for Hurricane Katrina, but I just really wanted to be there. I want to be in New Orleans. I wanted to help rebuild that city in whatever capacity that looked like. I threw my name in the job, Dan, for like head of mitigation, like actual physical. I've never done that. But you know what that did? I was interviewed for that job. I met all that leadership. I met Tony Russell, and I kept corresponding with Tony Russell through the whole process. And then what that job gave me was my whole job was to tell that story of the recovery efforts, making me an amazing storyteller, which helped me be a contender for the job at Disney as their director of global crisis management. And I looked at that job posting, Dan, and it posted on the International Association of Emergency Managers job boards, one of the best on the planet. And I looked at that going, I have no clue what kind of problems Mickey has. And I just threw my name in the hat. I never worked for the private sector. I'd always been in public service. I had if you looked at that job description, Dan, you would have said, you're not qualified for the job. But I threw my name in the hat, Dan. And I got the call for an interview. And I got that job. One of the best jobs I've ever had. And then, which then propelled me, gave me the stage to then come to Walmart as their senior director of global emergency management and be able to, I'm still not sure if it was a positive or negative experience leading through the global pandemic for the world's largest company, but what an experience at the end of the day. And had I not just stayed with it, and I think it's something I've had as a kid, Dan, because I was used to all that negativity, you just can't do that. And especially my dad wanted boys. He ended up having 3 girls. And I was very determined. I was going to do anything. It didn't matter that I was a girl. And I had determined in 3rd grade, I was going to be the first woman president. And I got out my president pencil box and I put my school picture on there. I glued it on and I figured out what year it was. And because I was like, you know what? Doesn't say I can't just because I'm a girl. So I'm going to do it.
That's awesome.
So that's my advice for everybody. Just do it.
No, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's just it. Just do it. Like Nike says, just do it. Just take the steps. Simon Sinek says, start. You start now, but start small. But it's one of those things, like, you don't have to be like, there was someone I spoke to and I'm forgetting the name, and which is really going to upset me because I wanted to give them credit for this. But they said, when it comes to everybody, they want to be great at something before they start doing it. But you don't, and it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert. It doesn't take 10,000 hours to be good at something. So it's one of those things too, like, you don't have to be great at something to start doing it. Like, you got to start doing it in order to get great at it. And self-promotion and marketing and advertising, what it is that we do, not only just for ourselves, but when we get into a position, we want to stay in a position, right? We want to do very well. We want to get stronger. So you got to put yourself out there. You got to promote yourself. And I'm surprised at how many emergency management professionals, I say professionals in quotation marks there, we don't have a cover letter or don't have a 1-page or a 2-page resume. And I do. It took me a long time to do that because I don't need a cover letter. Why do I need a cover letter? Blah, blah, blah. But how many organizations out there when you apply now are requesting a cover letter? So having a cover letter that's there that you can go into and make it appropriate for that job, that's an important thing to do. And it saves you so much time. But having a resume too, a short resume and a long resume, because I get asked too, you got a short resume. It's a 1-page resume that just has my experience on there. It's it. There's no details, just my experience, length of time at my places, and my education. That's all people want to see sometimes. Then they say, do you have a more detailed resume? I can send them that. It is surprising me that we're wanting to be professionals, right? Emergency managers, we want to be seen as professionals. We want to be seen as experts. We want to be seen as relevant in what it is that we do. And we don't take those necessary steps to make sure that we are set on solid footing when it comes to knowing what we do, how we do it, why it's important, how we benefit others, and then being able to tell them that.
Own your brand. People have to own their brand and define it, or it'll be defined for you. And that's all about how do you want to come off? And when you're talking to someone, and it may not be a job, it may be just volunteering for something, but how you represent yourself and define yourself is super important. And it goes to your point, Dan, about the professionalism of this field. We have to, as emergency managers, get better at branding ourselves. And I'm so thankful for that FEMA experience, because I really learned that even before Disney. But when you think of iconic brands, what do they have that's different than just the common person? It's how they're marketing themselves. They're defining what their keywords are. And that's hard. It's hard to think about as a person. I don't want to market myself. I don't want to come off arrogant. But if you present yourself with, here's what you bring to the table, why you're the value add, and put yourself out, that's not arrogance. That's confidence. And confidence is so important. And the only way you get confidence is if you put yourself out there and you try and you take hits and you pick yourself up and you beat down Tony Russell to give you the job that you want.
And I have multiple things that I look at on a daily basis that just remind me. One of them is progress, not perfection. But I've also started changing. People say practice makes perfect. I don't say that. I say practice makes better. You're not really ever perfect, but every time you practice, you get better. So as we were talking about earlier, taking an interview, whether or not you think you're going to get the job, or even if you think you're going to take the job, if you get offered it, for the practice to be able to exchange the conversation, answer questions, ask questions, the relevant questions in the interview, but also practicing in a volunteer fashion. We talked about earlier how you, with Red Cross, and how you've parlayed some of that into now relationships that are helping you with your current, with the business, and getting and actually expanding out there and actually doing things on a larger level. So let's talk about that. We do here, as a leader, as someone, we want to give our time. Giving of our time is service to others. So leadership is service to others. So why wouldn't you volunteer your time to be service to others? But you can utilize these things, these volunteering at like the Red Cross or Salvation Army, or there's so many other places out there that I can't even mention. You have these response. What's the one I'm looking for? I'm thinking of it's right there. It's dang it. It's right on the tip of my tongue, and I can't. It's it's veteran owned, and I'm like blanking on it.
Oh, I know exactly the group you're talking
Yeah,
about.
I can't. It'll come to me in the middle of
It will come. Yeah. But even things like Operation Barbecue, a group of guys that got together, and now it's a great organization that gets deployed and offers people on their worst day some amazing barbecue, right?
I mean, there's the people interact with people, and you've said it. You get to make some of these connections and these networks and these collaborations that will basically give you some skills that will help you in the now, really, but that'll help you later on. You can revert back to them always. So I'd like for you to talk about how you've done that, and especially how it relates to promoting emergency management overall at a larger scale.
I really feel that any job that I've ever applied to, I treat it as one, I'm really interested in this job or this opportunity, and I want this. But a secondary is that I'm growing my network, right? I'm meeting people, I'm meeting new people in new areas, especially when I made the leap from public service into the private sector. But I feel sometimes we as emergency managers don't really value the skill sets that we bring to the table and how they can be used from a volunteer setting. Oh, I don't want to go volunteer for XYZ organization because I don't want to be a burden. I don't know how I can help. But sometimes it's just raising your hand of saying, oh, hey, I would like to learn more about this. For a personal example is for the United Nations. I competed in MAL-UN as a kid. I've always wanted to work for the United Nations. And I saw there was an advertisement so this is 2021, like mid 2021, that they wanted to get their annual disaster risk conference back up and going post COVID. And they were planning it for Bali and Indonesia in 2022 in May. And they were looking for volunteers to help plan the conference. And so here I am, Bentonville, Arkansas, working for Walmart, underwater with all the response and everything that came with the job. And I see this and I'm like, oh my God, this is a dream opportunity. I don't know anybody. What are they going to think of me, little old Arkansas? And I would be doing it under my company's umbrella, which I wasn't doing full time at that time. And Dan, I just threw my name in the hat. I threw my name in the hat, filled out the application. And you know what? They picked me. They picked little old Resiliency Initiative to help plan a whole cohort focused on bringing down the silos between private sector and public sector when it comes to disaster risk reduction. What better topic for me, someone with my background, to help plan? Because that was why they liked me, is because I'm unique, right? I've done so many different types of jobs in so many different sectors. They wanted, oh, hey, she's the person. But if I hadn't thrown my name in the hat, Dan, I just looked at him like, it's the UN. Geez, I have no international experience per se, other than the work that I did with Disney. And that opened so many doors, Dan. Lorraine Schneider, who's my executive director, she came on full time in April of this year. I transitioned from Walmart to run my company full time. And it was because of that opportunity with the UN that gave me the confidence that I could do my company full time. And without just throwing my name in the hat, and without that opportunity, I don't know if I would have made the big leap from corporate America and a paycheck to do my own thing. But that the UN picked me, and then we had 20 days, Dan, in Bali, Indonesia, and it was like being in a movie, like a dream come true. We were at the table with all the countries, had their placards, and we had universal translators like in Star Trek. It was so cool. And the connections that I made, and I made an amazing connection with this gentleman who runs the Resiliency Foundation based in India that teaches disaster preparedness to kids in very rural areas. Try is sponsoring 5 of their schools, and I'm hoping this will be a lifelong partnership, that they will continue this education of kids in communities that have zero resources. So it comes to the individual, and then Try can come in and help the schools develop some hazard mitigation plans, and that we can do this around the globe. Had I not done it, Dan,
Yeah.
I'd just be all alone in Bentonville, Arkansas.
That's amazing. That's one of the things too, and I want to get on that, but I want to say number one is Team Rubicon. I blanked out Team Rubicon.
Team Rubicon.
One of the biggest things out there. I remembered.
I know, and they're so awesome.
Yeah, they are. They're great, and I know several people who volunteer for them and actually work for them. That it's a great organization. I can't believe I blinked on that. So Team Rubicon, I'm sorry, but I want to touch on something else that you said. Is you threw your name in the hat. You have developed a great name in the industry of emergency management. So to throw your name in the hat means something. So for what I would really love is for other emergency managers out there to build their names up, so that when they throw their name in the hat, they are recognized for the work that they do constantly. And you have been, and I'm gonna, even though you didn't take me to Bali, I'm gonna boast on you a little bit here, okay? You have, over the years, you've been very visible in what you do with Red Cross, with FEMA, the stuff you were doing with Disney, IAM, speaking at IAM, other conferences, very visible to build a name for yourself and promote emergency management and promote what it is that we do as a profession, as a professional, and how we can better serve other organizations, whether that be the Red Cross, whether that be IAM, whether that be the place that you're employed. So you've built a name of doing that over the years. And that's what got my attention when you stood up in Vegas and said, hey, yeah, I'm the crisis manager for Disney. And of course, I'm a Disney fan. So I was like, oh, there you are. But then to actually look and connect with you and see all the stuff that you did and how willingly you were to invite me in to see what you were doing. These are things that I'm really promoting in what it is that I'm doing with these summits, with this podcast, with the in-person conferences I'm going to be doing, the workshops. And to throw your name in the hat means something. Like that means something because you built a name for yourself that other people won't step up. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we can promote the individual EM to be involved in their local chapter of Red Cross, their state emergency management association, IAM, whether Team Rubicon. Being visible is important when it comes to marketing and advertising. You want people to know who you are. You want people to remember you. You want people to know the brand of Daniel Scott. I want people to know who I am. I want to have a good name in what it is that I do. And when someone says, hey, Daniel Scott, they say, yeah, I know who he is. He's got a podcast. He does summits. He speaks at conferences. He mentors people. Like he helps people get their CEM. He's got a CEM. Like I want that known. And to see someone who doesn't do that in our profession to help really promote not only themselves. I want to see people promote themselves. I want to see them succeed. But in order for them to do that, they have to be outward facing, forward facing, very proactive. That's what leadership is. That's why I'm promoting it so heavily. It's very proactive. And so is emergency management should not be a reactive field. And I feel like because we've come from response, we still have such a reactive realm that we work within that I really want to get us out of.
I hands down agree with you. And we do see that on the personal level. A lot of times, emergency managers aren't particularly active on social media unless they're responding to a negative. And I learned the value, obviously, when I was with FEMA, of always being that trusted source, getting in front of it, being positive voice first, and then you're more trusted in when things do go negative. And I just think we're such an amazing, wonderful community that we want to help people, that sometimes we put ourselves and this idea of developing a personal brand at the back burner. But like you said, Dan, it's so important to focus on that, because it is how you can grow the field. And everybody has something to say. It doesn't matter if you're an intern just starting out or you're a very senior individual in this space. You have something to say and share. Everybody has different gifts. Everybody's done very different in this field. And it's so important. That's what makes this field amazing. It's like you can be a planner one day, you can then be a public information officer the next day, then you could be out on a home fire response. And that's just me. And there's so much out there and diversity of this field. And so just start talking, start sharing, do a simple tweet if that's your thing, or write a blog, come and be on your podcast. It's so easy. There's so many forums now that you can have a voice. And if you make yourself that trusted person in whatever space that you want to be talking about, just like how you have, Dan, people come to you, people want to be on your podcast because of what you've grown. And it's a safe place to share. And I think sometimes people are apprehensive to take step, right? Because, oh, I don't know, I haven't done it this long. I have that's with us now, and she's amazing. And she has a background in the healthcare industry for 20 years. She's later in life decided to change and become an emergency manager. So she's freaking guts to go back to school and learn a whole new trade. But she feels that she doesn't have anything to say in emergency management. I'm like, what are you talking about? We just got through a global pandemic. You got a lot to say. And talk about that, talk about your experience, talk about why in the world did you change from your career into emergency management? How does that help grow the field? That encourages people like, okay, I didn't even know about this. This is a cool job. I want this job. And so it's just finding that confidence just to say something and start small. Put a comment on somebody else's post. Start small. And then you start growing yourself, start growing your brand, get confidence that way.
And you can honestly too, there's a way to, if you're hesitant to make that comment or put that post, you can reach out to people on back channels, direct message them, email them, phone call if you know who they are. You can reach out to people to ask questions, to set a meeting to say, hey, and I've had people do this to me, say, I'm looking to get into it, or I'm new into it. Would you mind having a conversation with me? Absolutely. And I would set up a Zoom or a phone call that I could just take it, just ask me questions like an interview. And they're asking me like, how'd you get into it? What do you do? I have a background in this. Where do you think I would fit in? These are things that people have reached out to me for. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it on the front end, you can do it on the back end until you get the confidence that you need to start doing it on the front end. And that's honestly where I started. I was not very much about putting myself out there, but going to conferences, training, talking to people, making connections, and being able to call them up or email them and say, hey, listen, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? Or, hey, would you mind having a conversation with me about this? That's how I got into podcasting. I reached out to Todd DeVoe. I was like, Todd, hey, Todd, I'm interested in what you're doing. Would you mind talking to me about it? And next thing I know, I'm co-hosting with him. So these are things that just by making the step to reach out and say, hey, I'm interested in this. You don't have to do it forward facing if you're embarrassed or unsure. But you can do it on a direct messenger or email or a phone call, or go meet them at a conference. Go to conferences, people. Go to conferences. You'd be surprised how many
Yes.
people I talk to say, "Oh, I don't have time for it. Or I don't think they're beneficial." Go to conferences. You're benefiting yourself, your organization greatly, and yourself there is huge, because even if you go back and you don't know something, if you got somebody you can turn around and say, "Hey, I don't know this. I'm dealing with this. Can you help me with that?" Is invaluable. Your value to go to conferences, people. And if you're not going to courses and outside of your own little area, go meet people, network,
Yes.
collaborate.
It's all about, I feel a foundation of emergency management is that network. And I feel I owe IEM for my entire career and all the hops I've had. And that's always been my network. Their annual conference is amazing. And again, it was through the years throwing my name in the hat to speak from whatever job. My first conference I spoke at was with the Federal Reserve, and I was talking about what the Fed's role compared from September 11th to Hurricane Katrina. The Federal Reserve, who thinks about the Fed and emergency management? I just threw it in as a topic. And this might surprise you, Dan, and your folks who are listening. I'm an incredibly shy and introverted person. I've had to my whole life really get out of my comfort zone to bring myself to meet people, because I know that's the benefit for my career. But as a very shy, introverted person, I can say it can be done. And many times I might be in the bathroom holding on to my notes because I'm terrified about going out, because that's been my therapy area. But and it's hard, it's really hard to push yourself out of that comfort zone and to meet new people. But if you do it the way you suggested, Dan, then the behind the scenes, just reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, send them a note. That happens to me often. I'll talk to anybody. I love this field, and to encourage them and just share tips of what's made me successful. And then that gives you the confidence to, hey, when you go to that conference, come up and say hello to that person. And then that door is just open. That door is now open to that person's network. And then you see them years going forward. But you got to, taking that first step, it can be really hard.
It can be, but it can be so beneficial. Just to give you an idea, like you mentioned at a conference, just to how quickly you can go from meeting one person to 5 or 6 or 10, because you come up to me and say hi, and I've met you, or we've gone back and forth on LinkedIn, and we introduce ourselves in person. I say, meet blank and blank. This is so, and you just met 5 people involved in emergency management or leadership, or at some level that you can benefit and know you, that you can now network with and potentially make friendships and collaborations with that quickly, just by saying, I'm going to go to that conference. This person's going to be there. I'm going to introduce myself to them. We've gone back and forth on email or direct messenger or social media. And then next thing you know, you're sitting at a table having dinner with a lot of people who can really help mentor you towards what you want to become. And it takes that first step. But as you mentioned, I call myself an omnivert, because I'm an introverted person, but I'm very extroverted when it comes to my job, because I have to be. I can go back and forth. If I'm just in a natural setting, odds are I'm going to be very extroverted. But when I'm working, I'm an extroverted. I'm very extroverted because I have to be. It's a very proactive field. Like, we should be putting ourselves out there. It's not an introverted field, but there's a lot of introverts in our field, and it's almost like changing characters. I mean, you have to go from being who you are naturally, just by yourself, and to saying, okay, I got to change up just a little bit to go meet people, talk to people, introduce myself, let people know what I'm doing, who I am, why it's important that they know me. That's important. It's important that people know you. You're valuable. You bring value. So,
and it's so hard. It's like sometimes you want to shake them. You're valuable. You should be at this table.
Know your worth. You have value.
Know your worth of how you are. But I did theater for a very long time. I actually minored in it in college, Dan, and I thought I would never my bachelor's was international relations and theater. And so when my first job in emergency management, I'm like, I am so not qualified for anything. But I have to tell you how I have leaned on my theater minor through my entire career. It's just, today, I am the director of this. Today, I am the president and CEO of my own company. So I assume a role, and it's really helped.
It does. It really helps. You own it. I feel like in this, I don't want to go off too much on a tangent on this, but I feel like there's such a lack of ownership when it comes to what we do sometimes. They treat it as a job instead of a passion, instead of something that they want to do. And we got to have some more ownership in it. We got to love what we do. Like I love emergency management. Now, you might not necessarily love where you're doing it. You can change that, but the profession overall, I love emergency management. And right now, I actually love where I'm at. But wherever you are, own it. Own that's your emergency management professional. You work in emergency management, and be passionate about it. And if you're not,
100%.
it's okay to not do the job. It really is. You can go do something else. Find what you're passionate about. It may not be emergency management. So go find what you're passionate about. But we work in such a level that people, whether they know it or not, rely on us so heavily for their livelihoods, their lives, their property, the damage to the environment. Like we have to take our job seriously. It's like we have people depending on us, no matter how small of an organization we work for, how big of an organization, or how big of a country. People depend on you, whether they know it or not, to look out for them. And if you own that. So I want to, before I round out this segment, you said TRI earlier, and I want everybody to know that TRI stands for the Resiliency Initiative.
Thank you, Dan.
And I want to give you a moment to talk about the Resiliency Initiative and what you guys are doing and how people potentially reach out to you for what it is that you do, and just knowing the organization and knowing those who work within there. Lorraine is one of my favorite people, so I'm very happy about that. I look forward to when you guys take me to Bali next time. I got my passport all ready to go. So
good. Be ready.
But please tell those who are watching and listening about that. Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
Live from that'd be fun. Ooh. Or maybe one of your summits, Dan.
Oh, yeah.
We gotta just start planning. No, thank you for that, Dan. And so it was April of this year that I decided to leave my role at Walmart and jump in doing my own boutique, women-owned crisis management consulting firm. And I have an amazing board of directors who have been old bosses and friends through the years that kind of help guide where our strategy going forward. My intent and my approach was really wanting to focus on those rural, underserved communities that may not have the resources to have an emergency manager, let alone somebody to help them with their plans. And then small businesses think about their business continuity planning. Because to me, that was one of the biggest lessons throughout COVID is you saw that disparity between the haves and have-nots, and the companies and communities that had resources and plans in place were able to do a good pivot. Those businesses that were small or those very rural communities, they lost everything, and a lot did not come back. And so I really felt I could add value. And I was able to convince Lorraine Schneider to leave Disney and join me on this endeavor. And she's my executive director, and she's based in Southern California. And then we have 2 interns right now, one in New Orleans and one in the Boston area. And our focus it's as diverse, Dan, as my backgrounds. I have a private sector client that it's on the education side, and we're building their emergency plans both at the corporate and then for all of their schools around the globe. And then we have a small Native American tribe outside where I grew up in Northern California, and incredibly rural. There is one road in and out, and they were impacted by a large fire 2 years ago, and still 200 homes are damaged and not been rebuilt. And so we're helping them with their hazard mitigation plans. And hopefully I'll be able to work with my old friends at FEMA to maybe get the tribe some additional focus and some grants on their planning needs. And then a couple clients in Southern California on doing emergency planning as well. And so it's been amazing. And my heart obviously is in the philanthropy side of things. And because I started a business, I'm able to sponsor some nonprofits I feel really strongly about. I had mentioned the Resilient Foundation in India that we're working with, but then also Project Camp, which Lorraine is chair of this organization, and they provide camps, like a camp setting for kids who their community might have been evacuated for a fire. and give them activities. Usually they partner with the Red Cross and set up the camp next to the shelter so the kids have some place to go, and their focus can be different. And then their parents can deal with the loss of everything and then go through the process of trying to rebuild. So an amazing organization. And we're hosting an event at IEM on that Tuesday evening after the award showcase stand. And so I'll make sure you have the invite, and just to hear about Project Camp, have a drink on us. And my favorite part of this, of emergency management, is bringing visibility to the amazing work that our community is doing. And so I'm always so thankful for you, Dan, for giving me the voice in this platform. And I love this field. And so if there's anybody I can ever help with, and just like you said, ask questions, interview me, and I'll tell you more, just do it. Because that is a lot of times the hardest thing. And I've never run a business before. Like I said, I was a international relations and theater major, so accounting's hard. But I'm learning, and everybody can learn. And so I really encourage you, and I thank you, Dan, for everything that you've done for me.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for spending the time with me. It's been great to watch where you've gone and how you've done things, but also the fact that this is how you can do it too. And that's what is important with some people. And I was one of them. But that looks great, but how do I do that? How do I get there? What steps do I need to take? And it's great to have somebody say, look, this is what I did. This is how I did it. You can do it too. So that's where I think we need more in the visibility aspect, as you just mentioned. We need to be so visible. We need to be so much more visible than we are. And even FEMA is one of the most visible places in the world, really. And still people don't really know what FEMA is and what it does and how they do it. And the fact that we can do it at different levels too. It's not just FEMA. Yeah, they're visible because it's FEMA. They come in after the big disasters, and you see the vest, and you see the jackets, and you see the things on the news. There's so much more to it than that. And we need to be visible ahead of those things. And I feel like we can get there if we can build that. I want to build a movement of emergency managers who are just being visible in their communities, being visible in their organizations, and being visible in our community. I want them up in conferences talking to me, telling me how they're doing it, what they're doing, and how I can do it too. I want that. My goal is to promote that. And I appreciate you taking the time to come talk to me on this, letting others who watch it or listen to it see how you did things and why you did things, and know that they could do things like that too. And so I appreciate it just as much as, so thank you for that. And you took Lorraine from Disney, but I love Lorraine, and I work with her still on EMGI, Emergency Management Growth Initiative, if anyone doesn't know. So yeah, if you can get to IEM, I'm not promoting IEM for any reason. I like IEM. I'm a fan of IEM. I got my CEM. Andrea's got her CEM. There's a lot of benefits to going to these conferences. I would highly recommend going, but go to your state conference, go to your local conferences, put a conference on yourself, a workshop, a summit, do something that brings visibility to what it is that you do and how you do it and how others can benefit from that. Andrea, I'm going to leave you with the last word before I close out the show.
Everybody said something to say, so say it. Thank you, Dan.
Awesome. There you go. Everybody's got something to say, so say it. I am Dan Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time. My goal here is to help promote you as the emergency manager, as a leader, and as the profession grows. Let's get better, and let's do it together.